Top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Skye Nicholson's Mexican debut. Her fight took place yesterday south of the border opposite the ring, Sabrina Perez.
I had Skye winning the fight on points.
Skye Nicholson, who ahead of the match stated that she'd been working on things, and if she showed just 20% of what she's been working on in the gym in the fight, it's going to be dominant. And you often hear fighters say stuff like that about what they're working on. With Skye, it was actually true.
Big difference from her other fights.
Her other performances, Skye Nicholson, who has the look of a outside fighter, outside pure boxer, sticking and moving 1 and 2 punches at a time, not taking too many chances, whereas in yesterday's fight, she showed a lot more spite.
Holding her feet to stay in position.
Stay in position to counter, where normally Skye's way out there on the outside, moving lateral, pecking away at an advancing opponent. In this fight, she held her feet, held the center of the ring,
worked off the counter,
stepped into her punches, stepped into her jab afterwards, backing off Sabrina Perez, who was the noticeably smaller, shorter, stumpier fighter, and slower.
It's the best performance I've seen from Skye Nicholson.
It's the best I've ever seen her, and I hope she keeps it up, irrespective of the tragedy that took place during the fight and afterwards.
It's got to be taken that hard.
Sabrina Perez's husband and trainer suffering a heart attack during the fight, being rushed to the hospital and subsequently passing away when he got there.
It's unfortunate.
So as far as the performance, it really was the best I've ever seen Skye Nicholson, and we need to see more of that moving forward, because the women's featherweight division is a particularly deep division, a deep weight class with a lot of unbeaten up-and-comers, talented ones, just like Skye. You're talking about Raven Chapman, Sarah Liegman, Sophia Leash, Ebony Jones, Tiaria Brown,
Karis Artingstall,
let alone Amanda Serrano, this division's reigning undisputed champion, who Skye Nicholson seems to have in her crosshairs. This fight with Sabrina was for a WBC interim title that she can use as a segue to challenge Amanda straight away.
What we saw
in Skye Nicholson's fight with Sabrina Perez is that Skye was able to effectively use her height, use her length, her long levers, to counter Sabrina Perez.
She was countering Sabrina Perez to stop Sabrina in her tracks, then stepping into her punches afterwards to back her off, blitzing her.
You don't often see pure boxers like Skye Nicholson string together that many punches, that many combinations, moments in this fight where she'd get off a good counter, a clean counter, she'd follow up by stepping into her shots, backing Sabrina into those ropes, and unloading,
overwhelming Perez.
She looked sensational. I have to admit that Skye Nicholson really looked the part, and one of the biggest hang-ups I've had with this fighter, at least in the past, is that she's been a little bit too complacent, too comfortable, just hanging back and staying on the outside, just 1 and 2 shots at a time. As she steps up in class, that simply won't do.
She'll need to be busier, and she was busier with Sabrina Perez, though it's not without its angling. Sabrina was a noticeably shorter, slower fighter.
I very much enjoyed Skye's performance. It was a welcome change, but let's not forget that Sabrina Perez was a shorter, stumpier, and slower fighter than Skye Nicholson.
Skye did a good job to take advantage of that. That's what you're supposed to do, but that's not what you're going to face with every girl, and that's certainly not what you're going to face in Amanda Serrano.
I really like the offense from Skye, but those hooks mid-range to inside could stand to be a little tighter, a little bit more compact.
The straight punches from the outside coming in were the most effective. The straight punches were good, but the hooks were a little wide.
Could stand to be a little bit tighter.
And if they're tighter, she can turn her hips into those shots more and drive them more.
Power looked good. It's the strongest I've ever seen Skye Nicholson, but we can't forget that while this is the strongest we've ever seen Skye Nicholson, this was against Sabrina Perez.
A fight with Amanda is a very different fight. Amanda, by and large, is a more experienced and more prolific, stronger puncher than a Sabrina Perez. I mean, I think that goes without saying.
And that's saying that there is more work needs doing for Skye Nicholson. She looked great with Sabrina Perez, but Sabrina ain't no Amanda.
Now addressing the tragedy involving Sabrina's trainer and husband, who unfortunately yesterday passed away south of the border, all of the excitement likely got to him.
You could see during the broadcast on the top right corner that he keeled over in the middle of the fight, fell over.
You know, it had to have upset him to see his wife taking so much punishment opposite the ring, Skye Nicholson. That's likely what it was, but for him to have keeled over the way that he did, that accents an underlying condition that was already there.
Had to have been given what happened, and what he witnessed likely flared it up.
It's a tragedy. It's unfortunate.
Sincerest condolences to the Perez family.
It's a hard, grueling sport on the fighters, but this is an example of how it's a hard, grueling sport on their families as well.
Having to sit back and endure, so unfortunate. The last thing I expected to see yesterday.
A career-best performance from Skye Nicholson, marred, overshadowed by tragedy. That's the best way to describe it.
It sucks, but, that's the way it is. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, it has been officially announced that Adrian Broner will face Chris Howard in a welterweight clash on November 4th in Miami. Lunga Makabu versus Noel Gavor, otherwise known as Noel Mikaelin, on the undercard. Press release from Don King claims this will be for the vacant WBC Cruiserweight world title, and Badu Jack has vacated, which is the more interesting part of the story for me.
Yeah.
I can care less what Adrian Broner's doing these days when he's not threatening.
When he's not threatening McDonald's employees, he's fighting part-time boxers. I mean, the last guy that he fought, I think he was a lawyer. What's this Chris Howard guy, a paralegal?
Adrian Broner seems to me that whatever he was gonna do in the sport of boxing, he must have done it already. His career is going nowhere. Still under contract with Don King. Those of you will remember that after he left the PBC, he jumped into bed with Black Prime, and from Black Prime, he jumped ship over to Don King, highlighting how desperate he is these days.
He must be to be signing a Don King.
But he's not the story here. He's not the interesting part. Lunga Makabu versus Noel Gavor is what has my attention, and if this story checks out, it will be for the newly vacated WBC title.
The one Lunga Makabu lost to Badu Jack, and Badu Jack's last fight, Lunga's as well. Lunga, who sports a professional record of 29 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 25 knockouts, having been knocked out 3 times.
Saying that every single time Lunga lost, he lost by way of knockout. I have to admit that I thought that he would be successful against Badu Jack because Badu Jack is some years older than Lunga Makabu. Lunga is a career cruiserweight.
Whereas Badu Jack moved up there in the twilight years of his career.
And I underestimated Badu Jack. I did. I didn't take into account that for the last 3 years and approximately the last 6 or 7 fights, he's fully acclimated to the cruiserweight division, and if nothing else, he was always a better boxer than Lunga Makabu. Lunga, the southpaw, the hard puncher,
Albeit the limited boxer.
looked very limited opposite the ring, an older, weathered Badu Jack who not only outboxed him, but he stopped him.
Wasn't expecting that.
The reason that Lunga Makabu now has to face Noel Gavor is because I remember reading that Noel Gavor is the mandatory challenger for the WBC title, and I also remember reading that Lunga Makabu had a rematch clause in that Badu Jack fight.
I vaguely recall.
Noel Gavor sports a professional record of 26 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 11 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 28 professional contests. I remember this guy from the World Boxing Super Series, from the Maris Breeders fight. I remember this guy being a stubborn customer and a capable boxer.
Durable.
Albeit not very active, Noel Gavor in the last 3 years or so has only boxed 2 times. Once towards the tail end of 2020, sat out all of 2021, and only saw action once last year, over a year ago, in February.
Less than ideal circumstances ahead of a title fight, but he is getting his title shot.
And what I believe motivated Badu Jack to vacate the WBC title to move up in weight, up to Bridgerweight, to take on Lukas Rozansky. This news
Seems like it's confirmation of that Badu Jack will in fact be moving up in weight to take on Lucas because he's chucked his WBC title. Likely because Noel Gavor, from what I remember, he's a stubborn customer, and for Jack, he's a high-risk, low-reward kind of guy.
big guy, young guy. I only wonder that Badu Jack, who signed to Skills Challenge, the promotional outfit that was supposed to be bankrolling Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, Badu Jack signed to them some months ago. And with all the movement, news of new management in Saudi, I wonder what that does to that fight. I wonder what that does to Badu Jack versus Lukas Rozansky, because last I checked, they were the ones that were supposed to pay for it.
What happens now?
Hard to say. Downstairs at Cruiserweight, former champion Lunga Makabu will get another crack at the apple, another chance to see himself crowned WBC Cruiserweight champion opposite the ring Noel Gavor, who hasn't fought in well over a year, whereas he himself, he saw action earlier this year against Badu Jack, but he got stopped. He got knocked out.
That was in February.
Tell you what I think. I feel like the winner of the upcoming Zurdo Ramirez versus Joe Smith Jr. fight, I feel like the winner of that fight is on a collision course with the winner of this fight, the winner of Makabu versus Gavor.
Lunga Makabu was always the weakest link. He was always the most beatable champion of all the Cruiserweight champions at Cruiserweight in recent memory.
If a Badu Jack in his late 30s or early 40s was able to beat Lunga Makabu, Zurdo Ramirez, should he beat Joe Smith Jr., if he wins, Zurdo Ramirez, who's some years younger than Badu Jack, surely he'd stand a decent chance against Lunga Makabu. That's if Lunga becomes champion again. Now, if Noel Gavor becomes champion, the situation is a little different because Noel is younger and he's bigger.
It's more of a gamble.
Though if nothing else, it would be a relatively easy fight to make if Noel were to win and he were to become champion because he's not with a major promotional outfit. There are no politics, no platform issues to have to deal with if you were trying to make a fight between Zurdo and Noel. We are thinking several months from now, beyond the upcoming Makabu versus Gavor fight and beyond the upcoming Ramirez versus Smith fight.
More immediately, if Noel Gavor wants to become WBC champion, he has to try to take the fight out of the judges' hands. Lunga Makabu is the house fighter. Lunga Makabu is signed to Don King, and he has been for some years now.
Some would argue that Lunga Makabu, who faced the Biso Muchunu 2 times, some would argue that he lost to both of those fights, that both times he fought that guy, he robbed that guy. So if he's still standing at the end of the Noel Gavor fight,
Might rob Noel Gavor.
there's room for funny business if Noel Gavor doesn't make it decisive, doesn't make it emphatic. There's room for funny business if he don't stop Lunga Makabu.
Silver lining for him is that Lunga Makabu's already been stopped 3 times before, so if he presses him,
He's already coming off a knockout loss in his last fight earlier this year, so if he plays his cards right and he puts a squeeze on that guy, maybe he can take it out of the judge's hands.
see what happens in November.
Upstairs at heavyweight, Bob Arum on Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk says, "It won't be hard to make. I think that fight's gonna happen, and hopefully it will happen sooner rather than later. Probably early next year, but it could happen as early as December."
I don't buy it.
You've been keeping up with Tyson Fury's comments on the fight, what's supposed to be his interest in it or the lack thereof, what he recently told Michelle Joy Phelps.
Fight John Jones next, yeah.
So where does the undisputed fight sit then? Is it not priority anymore given what it took to kind of...
Has it ever been my priority? Did I ever say I wanted undisputed? It's always been some other little bitch's dream, hasn't it? Undisputed, road to undisputed. Listen, I got Francis Ngannou to deal with, and should the other little sausage want to fight for the undisputed, then, if he takes a small percentage, then we might make it happen. But if he wants a large bag, then I'm going to say, no thank you.
It's a stark contrast between Bob and Frank's attitude towards making the Usyk fight and Fury's attitude towards making the Usyk fight. Very recently, doubling down on the comments he made to Michelle Joy Phelps with the Daily Mail, saying, "Unifying the division doesn't mean shit to me. I'm looking for the biggest payday."
Imparting those quotes to 2 separate media outlets that communicate the same thing. He doesn't care about undisputed.
Regarding his next assignment, Fury is interested in whatever brings him the most money,
Right.
with the least risks,
Right.
which includes another crossover fight with current UFC champion John Bones Jones, who's rumored to be approaching his retirement. Fury doesn't view Usyk as an opponent who brings in a major payday. Nope, I am not interested in fighting Usyk. He's a little Ukrainian dosser. That's all he is to me. No interest in unifying the division. It doesn't mean shit to me, Fury told the Daily Mail.
Could you imagine if Anthony Joshua said something like this in reference to fighting Usyk? Well, he's already fought 2 times. Could you imagine if Canelo Alvarez or Naoya Inoue?
Really, any other fighter said they don't care about unifying titles and they don't care about fighting the only other champion at the weight. What would people say? Tyson Fury feels that he's achieved a level of success.
He doesn't have to do stuff like that anymore. And the media doesn't lay into him for it often enough. He said this more than once.
All that stuff about unifying and whatever, it doesn't really mean anything to me. I'm looking for the biggest payday most of my time. Usyk doesn't cut it. He's just a foreign person who doesn't speak good English, so you really can't sell him. I am looking probably for for another American, probably looking to fight John Jones in a boxing fight. Another wild scenario that Fury would entertain is a showdown under MMA rules with Ngannou. I would fight Francis Ngannou in a cage. I believe I would kick his ass in a cage as well as the ring.
Oh, so you're saying that because Usyk's English ain't too good, you shouldn't have to fight him. But how was Tom Schwarz's English?
How was it?
Cephas Furry's.
How is their English? Because you ain't had no problem fighting them, while Bob Arum continues to make assurances on the behalf of his fighter. His fighter is saying something very different.
And what kind of cockamamie world champion? World champion.
Is he a world champion, or is he just champion of the English-speaking countries?
That he takes such great offense to Usyk being a foreigner whose English ain't too good.
I'd say his English is on par with Francis Ngannou's English. In any event, Fury says haters are gonna hate. I am getting a bag. I'm getting a fucking big bag too. So I won't feel bad when I am cashing my check-in. I won't care when I am eating ice cream and marshmallows all day, drinking pina coladas. I'm not thinking, what about those boxers and all that shit?
A genuine moment of clarity, a genuine moment of truth from what is one of the most disingenuous pugilists in the sport right now.
Tyson Fury, who'd prefer to fight non-boxers in boxing matches at this stage in his career, which really wouldn't even be an issue if he'd cough up the WBC title. If he'd give up the green belt, let some other boxers box for it, if he's not interested in boxing boxers anymore.
But you know what that is.
If he actually gave up his belt, all the people that follow him due to his boxing, his actual boxing matches with actual boxers, they wouldn't be that interested in him anymore. Not if all the news centered around him were centered around circus fights and novelty acts.
There's still people running around saying that these are just mind games. They're mind games from Tyson Fury. Every time this guy puts his foot in his mouth, they chalk it up to mind games.
They're not mind games. He's just being honest. Being honest for a change. And when people show you who they are, you should believe them.
Do you think that he capped off last year with Derek Chisora, of all people, by accident? This Francis Ngannou fight.
Between last year and this year, look at how he's been keeping busy. The heavyweight division is not comprised of just 2 to 3 fighters, 2 to 3 specific names. There's a big pool of talent out there that Tyson Fury can't be bothered with because he doesn't want to compete anymore.
Which is his prerogative.
Though he shouldn't be allowed to hang on to a heavyweight title whilst doing so.
Being allowed to make comments like this.
I don't think he's criticized enough for the words that come out of his mouth. What he's saying, what he is suggesting. The other day, Simon Jordan called Chris Eubank Jr. a charlatan. What about Tyson Fury?
Because what kind of charlatan says, well, I don't want to fight that guy because he don't speak no English?
Doesn't that make him an even bigger charlatan than Chris Eubank Jr.?
It's a love affair with this guy. What are they so enamored with when it comes to Tyson Fury? He's a fraud.